Well, let's kick it off. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you all. My name is Erin Hall. We are here for Revitalizing Your Finances, a fresh perspective for modern money management. I am a managing director out of Los Angeles, California, with Strategic Retirement Partners. We appreciate you being here. It's the second event of our 2024 education series. A couple of housekeeping quick notes for today before we get started. All lines are muted. So while we do want to invite you to ask questions, the line is muted. We are going to put up a QR code. Savannah, I think, is putting that QR code up. And we're going to invite you to use that, pull out your phone, pull out the question and answer page. That's how you're going to submit any questions that you have for our panelists today. I'm going to be monitoring those questions. We'll get as many of those questions answered as possible as we go through today. Savannah, are you popping up that QR code for us? All right, let's get going. This session is recorded, and we will share a copy of this recording with all those who have registered this week. With that, I am pleased to formally introduce our presenters today. We have Savannah Wofford and Garrett Leet. Savannah and Garrett are both certified financial planners, CFPs, and they're based out of Nashville, Tennessee. We're really grateful for them to be here. Savannah works out of our Nashville region as an educator for 401k plan participants and as a retail wealth advisor. And Garrett is a lead financial planner for our national team of wealth advisors. Garrett and Savannah actually know each other. They've had a long-standing relationship before coming to Strategic Retirement Partners, so you'll see some of that friendly banter today. I'm excited to be able to talk to you both about this topic. We're gonna talk about how finance is changing, some of the misconceptions that are out there, and honestly, some of the outdated advice that maybe you've heard, some of the people on the call have heard. We're going to debunk some of that and discuss some questions that were sent in ahead of time. So all of you that had submitted some questions, we really appreciate that engagement. Before this webinar even got started, it helped to shape some of the things we're going to talk about today. So let's get started. Hopefully you've got that QR code. Maybe give it one more second for anyone to pull that up. Have it available so that as questions come up, you can ask those questions. Like I said, I'll be monitoring it. All right, we're going to start off with savings. After all, we are an organization that helps with 401k plans and different types of retirement plans, although that's, of course, not the only type of savings. I want to jump right in because we had a ton of questions about this topic, just from people wanting to understand, how do I get started? When's the right time to start saving? And what does that really mean for myself today and for the future? So let's talk about it. Why should we bother start saving, particularly for retirement?
Yeah, so I mean, I would be remiss. So I think you asked when's the right time. I would be remiss if I did not say now when you're talking about saving for tomorrow versus spending it on today. I know that's pretty standard advice, but as you mentioned, Savannah and I went to college together, and we had a professor who reimagined the concept of saving as paying yourself first. And what he meant by that is, if you're not saving in some manner, you're not actually getting paid and you're not actually making any money. And what he means by that is, let's say you get paid, you're just taking money and you're not saving. You're just taking money from your employer and turning it around and handing it to somebody else. Like, you're just the middle person. So whether that be, you're a landlord, a lender, a subscription service. And I think that was it was mind-boggling at the time, but I really liked that perspective. So to answer your question, like, the sooner the better to start saving, even if it's small. So because I always like to say, it's not what you earn, it's what you save. And the earlier you can get into that habit where you're used to doing it, the better. Erin, I have to say, I have coached so many clients through retirement over the years, and I don't know about you, I have yet to find someone that said, I am so disappointed that I have saved too much in retirement. I haven't had that conversation yet. I mean, maybe you guys have. I have had the opposite conversation where maybe we have to play a little bit of catch up, which we can do. But I mean, you prefer the former, right? Of having too much. It's a good problem to have. So that's my perspective. I will say it's definitely easier said than done. But Savannah, what are your thoughts when you're talking to folks?
Yeah, I share the same sentiment. I've never had that conversation. If anything, we're having trouble getting retirees to spend money because they get so used to in the habit of saving that it feels uncomfortable to spend. In the past, people were balancing their checkbooks, and now that spending is more streamlined, saving can be harder. And I feel like we've kind of lost touch with that awareness and that reality of being able to save money while trying to keep up with your expenses. But really, this is transformed. I mean, in the digital age that we're in now, those type of methods have been reproduced into many different types of apps. And I know that the retirement plan industry in particular has worked really hard to add features that will allow you to take baby steps towards that saving and really try to automate it. The simple part is finding resources, but really the hard part is changing your habits, because you have to take a conscious and consistent effort to really strive towards saving more money. Garrett mentioned even if it's just a little bit. So we read a book called The Richest Man in Babylon, and the concept of the book is $10, just saving $10 over time can actually go a long way. Just like saving, in where you can get that $10 is maybe changing some of your spending habits, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But really, just starting now. The ways that you can automate that process, if you're looking to save for more shorter term goals, then maybe you can look at something called a high yield savings account. If you have a savings account through your bank currently, and it's a just regular brick and mortar bank that you have, you might see a couple cents added every once in a while. It's really not doing much for you. But if you look into a high yield savings account, especially right now with our current interest rate environment, you could be looking at anywhere from 4 to 5% earnings on your cash. So not only are you paying yourself first, but now you're getting that money to work for you, and it's still in cash, and you still have access to it if you need it. And really, the second thing, we're all here because we have a 401k plan with some great advisors here at SRP. And some of those features I talked about, one, you can look to see if you have what's called an auto increase feature on your contributions. So, how that works is you take baby steps. You can say, I want to increase my contribution by 1% every year up until I get to a certain percentage of income that you're trying to target. And oftentimes we get the question of how much should I save? And my rhetorical question is always, well, how much can you afford to save? Of course, at first you always want to make sure you save enough to get that company match. And then it depends from there, what do you want your retirement lifestyle goals to be? If you want to retire earlier, you're going to have to really save more, especially now that we're living longer. So just kind of looking at ways that, you can maybe pull from other areas to push more towards savings, and really just figuring out ways to automate that through either your payroll at your company or even just transfers at your bank. So that's my 2 cents. So that's really our soapbox on savings. Back to you, Erin.
I love that, Savannah. The woman that cuts my hair, she saves every $5 bill that she gets
Yeah.
until she gets that amount, and then she'll put it in the bank and put it in an IRA. It's almost like one of her customers told her that saving, was a good idea or something. I always tip her in fives now. But anything you can do to save, and I think what you mentioned, we do have to save a lot for retirement. The earlier we do it, the less we have to save over the course of our entire life. I love that idea, Garrett, of paying yourself first. Pay your future self first.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I've never met anybody that said, Aaron, I wish I had started saving for retirement later. Still hasn't happened. I agree with that. And to your point, the key focus of saving is the other side of that coin is spending. We understand in a high inflation environment, just balancing the idea of balancing your checkbook, although I haven't actually seen a checkbook in maybe 2 decades. The idea of, you know, spending less than you make is a tricky thing in this world today. People say, they can't afford to save, trying to trying to make ends meet. What do you say to those people?
Yeah. So this is a tough conversation to have. And it's tough because ultimately we're all living in the same world. And I empathize with the concept of living paycheck to paycheck. Ultimately, there's an equation that we have to learn how to balance. You have your income minus your expenses, and what's left over is what you have the ability to save. So when you look at this equation, look at you got two places. Either you can increase your income, which is difficult because now, we prioritize a work-life balance over anything. So, you could get a second job or you could negotiate your salary, but that tends to take more time and more responsibility and less, time to spend at home. And then on the other side, you have your expenses. Well, everything is much more expensive than it used to be. I mean, I can only imagine having kids, now and how expensive just daycare is and on top of everything else. So I totally empathize with, it can be tough, especially when you don't even have to leave your couch anymore to spend $100 on Amazon. Everywhere you go and everywhere you turn, there's a constant temptation to spend money. So here's what I would say. It really starts with, you may have to say no to a few things, but that is with the anticipation that you can work up to a bigger and better yes. And you can actually maybe spend some of that hard earned income on ways to reward yourself in bigger ways, such as going on vacation or having that shopping spree. Really changing your spending habits is not about stripping all the fun away from your life. That's not what we want to do here. It's just about setting boundaries with yourself and maybe even your friends and your family so that they understand that you're on a journey to, work on yourself and to build better financial habits so that you can, live a life of a fulfilling life and, find that happiness. What I would say is probably the biggest trap that I see my family and friends get into is going to be their large fixed expenses. And, once you sign that dotted line and you sign up for that monthly payment, that's what you have to pay. You have to keep up with that. And typically, when you are purchasing things such as a car or a house, there are so many hidden expenses that are buried either into, the contract that you sign, or that, you got to think about insurance and maintenance costs. So, don't sign up for a monthly payment that you can barely afford to begin with. Give yourself some wiggle room to work with. And it's okay to have a starter home or a not so nice car so that you can have the luxury of having more income to save. Something that I do, we talked about savings, you automate it. I also automate my bills. So I have an account that is specific for my bills. And so that way, by the time money even hits my checking account, I've already saved money and I've already made sure my bills are taken care of. So now whatever's in my checking account, that's what I have to spend on me. Now, that works for me, but I know Garrett, he's a lot more organized than I am. So what do you do, Garrett?
So, yeah. So first of all, I 100% totally agree with everything you said, Savannah. Budget's a swear word. Like, let's face it, people hate it. It's like I think people view it as like a diet for your money. So I totally get it. The good news is, just like there's multiple types of diets, there's multiple types of ways you can approach budgeting. And I think that's important because you could have the best diet plan in the world or the best budgeting software in the world, but if you don't follow it, it's not going to do you all that much good. So to Savannah's point, like, I'm a nerd when it comes to budgeting. I've got a beautiful spreadsheet. Every per paycheck allocation, I've got a percentage. I know exactly what I'm spending. And even I, can run into some things because, I mean, and that approach does not work for everyone. But I think it's worthwhile to get an idea of what you're spending and where, because there might be some things that like are breaking your budget. I know for me, it's Uber Eats, 100%. I was going through, I was just appalled about how much I was spending on Uber Eats. But that I know is a danger zone for me of breaking my budget. So all that being said, like I like to say at a minimum, track your fixed expenses. It's exactly what Savannah said. So things like your housing costs, so mortgage, rent, debts, your basic necessities, because those are the things that more or less is going to be the same every single month. And to Savannah's point, if that's a high bar, that's going to really, it's going to be tough. So really track those and do that responsibly. Secondly, is to automate your savings and get those in place. So exactly what we were talking about earlier. That can be done through the 401k, as we mentioned, which I think is a great place to start, as well as through, direct from your paycheck to an emergency savings account or a high yield savings account. I really, really like that approach because I always like to say, if you don't see it, you won't spend it, which is a great kind of attitude to have.
Yeah, and a lot of employers allow you to have direct deposit to more than one account. So
Mhm.
if you can do direct deposit to your regular checking account and maybe some of those dollars to a savings account, I agree. If you don't see it, you don't spend it. There are a lot of tools, but I hear what you guys are saying. The budgeting is really critical. If you don't know where your dollars are going, then you don't know how to make the best choices each and every month. And Garrett, that Uber Eats for me, it's definitely going out to
Mhm.
restaurants. I've been cooking at home a lot more and have found that that really has made a difference. Even in a world where you feel like, man, I'm already really tight. Yeah, if you know where your money is going, you might be able to find some avenues. Appreciate those great tips, you guys.
Mhm.
Something that keeps coming up is about credit cards and credit scores. Having debt that builds up. Um, but also when building credit, you should prioritize that and start thinking about that with a lot of emphasis there. What are your thoughts on that today?
Yeah, I mean, credit's an interesting topic, and I'm kind of glad that we already discussed saving and spending and all of that, what I would consider to be more fundamental prior to talking about credit. Um, in college, Savannah and I both were financial coaches for fellow college students. And one of the things I would always like to see with my clients at the time, fellow college kids, was that they were following a budget and that they had stick to it for at least like 3 months. Like I was strict before, like I would really talk them through credit and getting their first credit card, because if you don't have your expenses under control, with cash or a debit card, a credit card is just going to add, fuel on that fire. So that's kind of like, I, I don't want to scare people out of using it. I mean, maybe I do a little bit, but like you have to use credit responsibly. Having said that, I still do believe having a credit score is important, because there are a lot of times in life when you're going to be borrowing money, whether that be, for a home purchase or a car purchase. That credit score is going to affect the interest rate on that money and if you're even allowed to borrow it in the first place. So I know it gets a lot of hype, probably a little too much hype, but I still think it's beneficial to track that and to work towards establishing a good credit score. I will say though, it is not the epitome of financial health. It really only measures your ability to borrow money and then to pay it back, because you could have a great credit score and still not be in good financial shape. So
Mhm.
understand its place. It's still useful, but it's not the end all be all by any means. So that's kind of my little credit disclaimer. Savannah, I know, has a lot of great experience. We've talked about it when it comes to credit and maybe some more creative ways to kind of build credit.
Yeah. I think it's important to emphasize the last part of what you said, Garrett, of,
Mhm.
just because you have a good credit score doesn't necessarily mean that, you have great financial health. I mean, there's plenty of people that, are driving nice cars and live in a nice house, but, they're leveraged to the hilt to be able to afford those types of things. And, hopefully, luckily, they may have the income to cover the monthly payment, but not all of us have that luxury. I think it's important that we normalize debt. I feel like there's always been a sentiment of pay cash for everything. And yes, I mean, if you have the cash to buy a brand new car, then buy that car in cash. I mean, that's actually the best way to go about it because it's a depreciating asset. But not all of us have that luxury. I we hear all the time, or at least I grew up hearing, you want to save 20% to put a down payment on a home, right? Well, we already, our sentiment, our consumer confidence is already down. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but somebody who has not had the opportunity to buy a home yet, it almost seems like an unattainable goal. So then if you tell me, hey, if you have to save $60,000 in cash to buy, the average home price of 300,000, that makes me even less confident that I'm ever going to be able to buy a home. Like, not to mention, anytime I tell someone who is in a generation above me how much I pay in rent, they're absolutely flabbergasted. I love that word. But they're absolutely just taken aback. And my rent is 2 times their mortgage payment.
Mm.
So, it's when you hear people telling you this advice and it's coming from generations above us, maybe some of that worked before now, but we're in a different environment. So for me, I'm going to save money to go towards a house. Am I going to reach that 20% down payment goal? I don't know, because then the prices of homes are going to keep rising, right? So even if I get to the 60, well, now I have to save 80 because now the house is more expensive, right? So anyways, you're just constantly chasing your tail. Debt is a tool. We have to learn how to use it. Most importantly, of course, limit the amount of debt that you get yourself into. There's a difference between good and bad debt. When I got a credit card, my score jumped 95 points, which is like awesome. That's great. I have a good credit score. But also that can just so easily turn if I do not do what I'm supposed to and make all my payments on time. So if you want to, you should know what your credit score is at all times. I use Credit Karma and I have an app on my phone. You can learn all about all the inner workings of a credit score. And if you are looking at getting a credit card, you can possibly get one that has like cashback rewards. You can go to your favorite airline, or you can just get a regular credit card, and then every month they have these cashback reward programs that you can activate. And so you'll get there's 2 ways you can do it. You can recredit it back to the balance that you owe. But that's one thing that could be potentially beneficial. Now, of course, you can get one at your favorite airline or hotel, but if you go to TJ Maxx, every time I go to TJ Maxx, they say, hey, you want to sign up for this credit card to get 10% off in the store today? No, we're not going to do that. That's bad debt, right? That's not really going to do you many favors, and I can guarantee that 10% savings is not going to be worth it. But besides a credit card, you can actually sign up for like rent reporting agencies or services where, if you're paying your rent on time, they will apply it to your credit. So that way, it shows that you are making payments as you should. So that's a way that you can build your credit. And then I'm going to offer one last warning. Be aware of authorized signers and being a co-signer on things. You could either assign authorized user, or you can be an authorized user in somebody else's credit card. That can be good or bad. If you're on someone else's credit card and they have good payment history, then it could positively impact your credit score. But if they don't, of course, the opposite could happen. And also just be aware of being a co-signer. You are signing a contract so that you are just as legally obligated to pay for that, whatever it is, for the car or whatever it may be, just as the person who's purchasing it. So if you get asked to be a co-signer, think twice. So I actually had a friend ask me to co-sign on her car, and I was obviously savvy enough to know not to do that. So I just wanted to share that with you all.
Wow. Yeah, there's certainly a difference. Certainly a difference between good debt and bad debt. And the opportunity that you have with building your credit score, the things that those components look at is how long you've had credit, just simply the first time you opened a credit card, but also the amount of credit you have available to you and how much of it you're using right now. And so if you have an availability of $20,000 of credit, but you're only carrying an average balance when they look of $1,000, that's more favorable. In fact, one of the things I do, I put everything on credit cards. I pay it off because I want to get the points, and I actually pay that credit card off 2 to 3 times during the month because those snapshots are taken. It keeps your credit score potentially a little higher. There are a lot of questions coming in about credit and things, so we're gonna make sure to dive in when we get to that. Before we get to some of the Q&A here, I do want to ask about the hierarchy of savings. There's so many different types of savings accounts. Certainly we have the 401k. There are IRAs, outside brokerage accounts, high yield savings accounts, checking accounts and the like. What should people actually be investing in? Like, what is that hierarchy?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And actually, I think it's important for, Garrett, do you want to take the time to distinguish between an account and an investment? And then I can talk about what the underlying investment should be.
Yeah. So one of the big misconceptions that I see kind of frequently is the difference between an account and an actual investment, because I think new investors can kind of confuse the two. So when you hear these words like IRA, 401k, those are accounts. Just like a checking and savings accounts, they hold cash. IRAs and 401ks hold investments and mutual funds and things like that. So I think that's one big misconception that I see that hopefully, we can clear up for folks. There are other misconceptions on how people invest. Similar to do with those accounts, the difference between a traditional and a Roth IRA 401k. And that's really just going to impact the taxation of those accounts or the funds that go out of those accounts. So, quick crash course. A traditional, you're going to get a tax deduction up front when you put that money in, whether an IRA or 401k. You may also hear it called a pre-tax IRA or 401k. It'll grow tax deferred, and then when you take the money out, it'll be reported as taxable income. Same way that your paycheck is currently being reported as taxable income, so you could owe taxes on that. The difference with a Roth is kind of flipping that concept on its head. So you don't get a tax deduction up front. It still grows tax deferred, and assuming you make a qualified distribution, in retirement, you never have to pay taxes on that money ever again. So it's for that reason that typically Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks are beneficial the longer you're able to let that money ride without having to touch it. So I personally tend to be very pro Roth. It's different for everyone. There's always considerations based on your own personal circumstances, but a general rule of thumb, just for those listening, if you're kind of like, should I do traditional or should I do Roth? I think if you are under the age of 40, to heavily consider using the Roth, because if you're under 40, you've got probably at least 20 years until retirement, and 20 years of tax-free growth can be so substantial. So Savannah, that's kind of like my overview of the different, accounts you kind of often see out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to kind of set the stage on the next step. So, you have your account. Aaron, you asked about order of operations, right? The reason why, we talked about savings first and kind of spending is because, yes, we want you to save for retirement, but you also need the cash to be able to afford to survive today. They often say you need 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in cash. Well, nowadays that might look more like 6 to 9. I mean, it just depends on what your occupation is, how quickly you could get a new job, wherever the case may be. But anyways, first, look at a high yield savings account. And then, something, I think one of the benefits that could be offered from your employer that I think is more underutilized is a health savings account. There are there are some great tax benefits to a health savings account, and the limit is lower, and most likely your employer may be adding to that as well. So, you can, I'm not going to get into how all that works. I could, but anyways, look into a health savings account. And then let's look at your 401k. And those are just 3 different types. We can continue to go down the list, but those are 3 that you probably have access to now that will be easier to see. So those are.
I do think it's important to just to explain with HSAs,
Yeah.
your employer has to sponsor a high deductible health plan for you even to be eligible to participate in an HSA. So there is a qualification requirement there. It allows you to save dollars. I always like to say the S is for saving, not spending. To save dollars in a lot of cases, a tax-free environment for expenses either in the future or in retirement related to healthcare. It's one of the top expenses in retirement certainly is healthcare expenses. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I get so excited about those dang HSA accounts.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the disclaimer.
And when you're thinking about, all these competing demands for your dollars, certainly at minimum participating in your retirement plan up to the match. If you have access to an HSA plan, you might consider dollars that you could be saving. Let's say you could save 10% in your 401k and your employer matches, let's say 50% up to 6%. Maybe you do the other 4% or some percentage of that in an HSA, or build in your personal savings before you go full tilt into that 401k savings. There certainly is a competing demands on your dollar, which we understand. We've covered the importance of saving. We've covered some ideas on how to maybe trim your spending, to budget, know where your dollars are going. We've had some questions come in about tools, and you mentioned Credit Karma, Savannah. I don't want to give any commercials for any particular, tools that are out there. I will say, since you mentioned it, Credit Karma has some budgeting tools. There are a number of websites that you can have aggregated information. A lot of your 401k providers might do that for you, where you can actually provide your login information in a secure environment and track your spending. A lot of credit card companies will do that, and you can, evaluate that to know where those dollars are going. A resource I use a lot is NerdWallet, to go to and just Google who has the highest yield, savings accounts this month,
Yep.
who has the different programs, and that's just providing you with the information of what's available. They don't have any products there. Any ideas like that outside of the ones maybe I mentioned that you might recommend?
Yeah, so we have a great resource just with with our clients that we work with. It's called Asset Map, and it's a great, to your point, kind of a data aggregator of you can I think we might actually have a link to it here that you can basically, it kind of aggregates all of your accounts where you can see where you are. And then it kind of can tell you where maybe the next places to go. So it can compare you to others in your age group or, in your peer group. So I think if you're looking for a place to start, I think Asset Map is fantastic. You can kind of look at it like a GPS, right? A GPS can't tell you where to go if it doesn't know where you are. So I think just having a starting point is great.
Yep.
Yeah. So, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think so. Garrett talked about how we worked with peers in college to step them through. If you're looking for more of a starter point of figuring out kind of like your budget, then you need a budget. It's YNAB. I mean, that's one of the resources that we use, and Garrett is still responsible and he uses it. Like I said,
what is it called? What is it called?
It's called You Need a Budget. It's YNAB. Yeah. So I mean, there is
YNAB. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's one that I think we've used it. It's tried and true. I mean, we know what it has to offer. Plus, they have a lot of really great educational resources, and I think that's what we wanted to do today. Was not, tell you. We're just trying to provide the way, and then it will take some action on your part to really go research some resources, because they're out there. The education is out there. You just got to go looking for it.
We've got a ton of awesome questions. Before I get into it, I want to do some real quick rapid fire with you all. Any closing thoughts from the things we've already talked about before I get into the rapid fire here?
Yeah, we can do that. I do want to go back to the investing real quick, and I'll keep it quick. So we talked about account types, but a lot of people know you should invest. And if you are saving to the 401k, you are investing. But I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions, and people think that, there's some type of get rich quick scheme out there that you can go towards and, profit really quick and then, move on. But really investing should be a long-term commitment from you. So you want to make sure that you're diversified, right? You have different tax types that Garrett talked about, and then you have different investment types. And you want to, if you don't know anything about investing and don't care to learn, in your 401k there are options for an easy button. You have target date funds likely in your menu of investments. You may even have like risk-based models, even managed account services. So, you should look into some of those things with the investments. But I just wanted to wrap that thought up. Going on to, kind of wrapping all of this up into a pretty bow. Ultimately, the whole point is here that you want to spend less than you earn and then save the difference towards what really matters for you and makes sense to you. And that's, you get to design your plan. It is your financial plan. So give yourself some grace and, take baby steps one day at a time towards really figuring out how to balance, everything that you have going on in your life and everything that's demanding your attention. But, you bearing your head from your finances is not going to change or help or fix anything. Tackle it head on and really face it. The sooner you can do that, I think the sooner you'll be on the right track.
Yeah. The best time to start was yesterday, but the second best time to start is today. So absolutely, I agree with everything Savannah just said. Better later than never, but better sooner rather than later. So yeah, I think that's great, Savannah.
What's a rapid fire?
Pardon me. Okay, some rapid fire questions because we've got a couple minutes here. Let's see. Is it better to pay off debt or do both savings and pay off debt?
So
good.
I think the answer to all these questions is going to be it depends. Go ahead.
So great. I'm glad we've got the asset map link up. But yes, so your financial advisor's probably favorite answer to any question, more than likely, is going to be it depends. And I think that's not any difference here. So it's going to depend on where you're saving, and then also what type of debt are we talking about? Is it a sub 3% mortgage or is it 30% credit card debt? Depending on that type of debt, that might really affect the answer. So I think it really depends. That's my quick rapid fire. Savannah.
Next one. Is it always good to max out 401k contributions?
So it depends. If you can afford to, like we talked about the order of operations, make sure you have the cash set aside, max out your HSA if you have one. If not, then yeah, sure. Max out the 401k if that makes sense for you. If not, if you have other goals, you could look into accounts for your kids, or you can have a taxable account to allow you to save to get ready to buy a house. So it depends on your goals. If you've already got everything else kind of worked out and you're just focused on retirement now, then yeah, if you've got the money, do it.
There's you mentioned Save for Kids. There's a question. What are some good vehicles for kids' education funds? This question mentioned other than 529 plans, but that is certainly one of them that provides a tax deferred growth vehicle for qualified educational expenses. Other ideas?
So I will say the question said other than 529. 529 is probably by far the most popular option. You can also use part of your Roth IRA. I have seen that in the past, as well as just actually 529s have become a little bit more flexible on what you can use the money for. But for those who are like, I don't know that my child necessarily is going to go to college, if they even decide for that, you could just set up, a UTMA account to also save and help them with that.
Uniform transfer to minors act, or UGMA, uniform gift to minors, based on your state. It could be one or the other. That's when the technical, the child is the beneficiary of the account, but the adult is the custodian of the account up until a certain age. Understand though, once that child becomes of age, that money's theirs. They can do whatever they want, bring all their friends on a trip to Bali, whatever. But that is one of the options. Quick question. Is a high yield savings account the same as a money market account? This one is actually yes or no. No.
I had to think twice, but no, it's not.
So a high yield savings account is liquid assets. You can transfer those dollars and there's a stated interest rate. A money market account is technically a mutual fund. It does have, liquidity where you'll have to trade out of it. You can generally only own them in a brokerage account. Similar in look and feel, maybe even in returns, but technically they are a little different. Is it a good idea to consolidate 401k accounts from different companies into one?
It depends.
Maybe.
Again, our fiduciary answer is you should examine the fees, investments, and services that you can get through either one. If you prefer account consolidation, it may be a consideration. But yeah, that's my answer.
Also, quick disclaimer on consolidating 401ks is to prevent or to refrain from consolidating a 401k into a contributory IRA, just because of the ERISA protections. You can lose some of those protections from a workplace plan like a 401k if those funds are commingled with an IRA that you're putting direct contributions into. So quick disclaimer on that as well.
There was a question on, does it make sense to switch where your savings are because a program might be offering a bonus, a bonus program for cash, and kind of playing that game of sometimes maybe you transfer $10,000 and they'll give you $200 bonus if you stay for 90 days and stuff. Is that worth it?
I mean, if you want to spend the time.
Sure. I mean, it could be, yeah. I mean, the term free money, like, I want to cringe at that. But I mean,
you're doing work for it. I think that's a good point. Like, you are doing the work to analyze how much time are you spending on doing that versus the trade-off. I've done that before. I've definitely taken advantage of certain ones. And I know on NerdWallet, if you say the best bonus bank programs, they'll show you. What you have to do is understand, like, if you're in one of those programs, what's the interest rate on them versus the interest rate you might get in a higher account that just doesn't give you a bonus. You just have to do the math, but in some cases it absolutely could. And honestly, the bigger your balance, the bigger the bonus can be. So that might be a factor, in that, I think for sure. Okay. Does having a few credit cards, even if you don't use it, lower your credit score? I'll answer that. Credit is based on how much credit you have available to you and how much you use. So if you have credit cards available and you're not using that credit, that can work in your favor. There was a question of, if you close an account that you haven't been using, will that hurt your credit? Along those lines, if you're limiting the amount of debt or credit you have available to you, it could, but I don't think that's a major factor. If there's more of a risk that somebody might snag that credit card, snag it, and and have fraudulent activity, I'd say it's worth the couple point hits you might take on that. All right, we are getting to a little bit of time, but what investment should I put my HSA account dollars into?
Well, how we like to look at those is, first, you want to keep enough cash to at least meet your deductible in the event that you have something happens and you need that cash available. And then beyond that, I mean, it depends. So typically, if we have an investor that is not as familiar with investing, we may put them in like a target date fund that's available in their HSA. But if they're a little bit more advanced, then we may build a custom portfolio for them. It just depends.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It depends on the life cycle of where you are. I know, just for me personally, to Savannah's point, I'm in a target date fund in my own personal HSA because I don't have a ton of medical expenses right now. But it stands to reason, as I get older and as we all get older, those medical expenses tend to go up. So I think a target date inside of an HSA is a great option.
Right. I think it also depends on how you look at it. Like, I wouldn't be as aggressive in my HSA as I would be in my 401k. But that's just kind of how I look at it and operate. But everybody might not feel that way. They may feel like they're never going to touch the HSA. They want to get as much of that growth as they can. So I think it just depends. I mean, I would go probably moderately aggressive with it.
What I'm hearing is it just depends on the time horizon with which you think you might use it. HSAs, every HSA I've ever seen has a component where you keep a certain amount in cash and then you can have the investment account. It does a really great job of bifurcating those two maybe competing demands. If you want to have some dollars for your deductible in short term, that should be there when you need it. And then also, you know, depending on how long term you think you might need it. If you're going to have a surgery or something, you can plan, or, you know, and you might need that, then really, yeah, that the time horizon always determines that. One last question: where can people find Asset Map?
Right here.
So right on the QR code that's right on the screen. So
Great.
I mentioned I think that you can use the QR code. It'll take you to that questionnaire, and then our team can actually build you an asset map that kind of gets you kind of started and kind of see where you are in the grand scheme of things.
Well, we are getting right to time. There are, let me see, it actually counts here. There are 45 questions here. We got
wow.
to maybe close to 10 of them. I try to consolidate some. There are questions that we didn't get answered to. If you want to, I mean, I'll speak for myself as a managing director of, you know, the plans that participants are on today. Here's the QR code to request a consultation. If you didn't get your question answered today, can folks go ahead and look at that QR code and maybe get their questions answered if they weren't today?
Absolutely.
Great. So we would invite you to do that. We want to thank everyone for your participation. We had consistently over 200 people attending this webinar. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we provided some information and ideas that you can take back when you're planning your financial plan and your next steps. We sure do appreciate you being here. A recording of the webinar will be emailed out later this week, so you can get a replay. We hope to see everyone during the rest of our 2024 education series. The next webinar is on August 13th, when we're going to cover health savings accounts in a lot of detail. So if you thought that was interesting, please register when that link comes out for that webinar. Again, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for that recording. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you, Savannah and Garrett, for a real informative session. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.